let's talk about the financial side. We know that we raised seed and Series A from Sequoia Capital. How did that come about, and do you have any tips for the audience about how to go about raising funds?
The fundraising process is an interesting one. For everyone who's kind of does an early stage company, one of the biggest aspects is getting that backing. It's one of the things that oftentimes entrepreneurs think of as one of the big challenges. But I think in general, the right way to approach that is as a partnership and as at some level a part of building your team, as opposed to a threshold. I think one mistake that oftentimes, especially first-time entrepreneurs, this was my second term, so I've been through the cycle once already.
Sure.
Oftentimes in the first time, there's a temptation or it's easy to fixate on that as being the objective. Okay. But in reality, the objective is to build a company that's successful and viable.
Sure.
And funding happens as a side effect of that. And so that's in general kind of like an overall mindset. I think that helps a lot. And then in terms of the tactics of raising money, I think there's a long list of things that come into play. And I don't know if you want me to.
I think it's the top, one on the list.
Some of the key ones are, you always want to be raising money when you don't really need it, before you really need it. There's a quote that says, if you ask for money, you get advice, and if you ask for advice, you get money. And I think that's it kind of holds true in some sense.
Sure.
There are some another important aspect is one of the big challenges always, or one of the big steps in raising money, is to have the first lead, the first person, meaningful investor, who kind of takes a step forward and says, okay, I'm going to lead this round. And for that, the choice of the person or the firm is very important.
Sure.
Because that person really sets a tone for everyone. And for that too, it's really important to view it to approach it as almost like an interview, or some case where you are choosing one of the most important participants in the future of your company.
Sure.
And having conversations around that tone, I think sets it up in the appropriate way. So that's another important aspect of the fundraising process. Another one is kind of choosing the phase at which you raise money, where it helps a lot for it to be at a point where the financing will make a material difference to the company, where in terms of how risk is perceived and how it's generally difficult to get investors to just kind of, unless you're showing up with your personal brand, then
Sure.
people will just fund you because you're someone famous.
Yeah.
Especially with first-time entrepreneurs, it's important to it helps a lot to have gone through a few stages of validation. So, for example, having built a strong team, or having built, especially in the consumer space, building early versions of the product that are getting traction is very important. For example, if you're building an iPhone app to do games, in some cases, in many ways, the biggest determinants of whether you're successful is whether you can build a game that's engaging that people will end up using. And if you have an early prototype or early version of the game that's not yet engaging, it's not money that's going to make it more engaging. And so, kind of being able to really articulate the impact of the financing, where if you have something that's already engaging and you're doing the financing because you're demonstrating that the engine is working at small scale and you can 10x it by having dumping money on top of it, that's attractive. If you have something that's still a research project, or still kind of at the completely open stage, raising money at that stage, it's a very different conversation. If someone is willing to back you, they're truly backing the individual,
Okay.
which is always the case at some level, but I think it's a different ballgame. Yeah.